Ghost Story, The Girl with Red Shoes. Like any boy in the world, for me, ghost stories and horror movies are just entertainment and scaring each other during idle times. I always have an absolute belief that the devil is a fabrication to make life less boring. I don't believe that when a person's body dies and is buried under 3 inches of soil, there is something called the soul that comes back to life and haunts the living. However, those seemingly wild things appeared right in front of me and I couldn't explain them. The story began on a late winter day. That day, Thao and I arranged to go back to our hometown. When I got on the bus, there was only one empty seat at the front of the bus and Thao sat near the back. Next to Tao's chair sat a girl. I glanced at the girl's waist-length hair, mouse-colored shirt, and red shoes with a pretty bow. Most especially, her bewildered eyes and her fingers scratching at each other. A bit shy, but I still decided to walk towards the girl and politely ask, "Sister, can you sit in the front seat so I can sit here with my friends?" The girl looked up at me, her eyes clearly showing confusion. After hesitating for a moment, she shook her head. I looked towards Thao with clear regret in my eyes. At that time, the girl reluctantly left her seat and went to the front of the car. While I was busy taking photos on the side of the road, I suddenly heard the sound of a car braking very quickly. Right after that, Thao and I were pushed forward, and someone screamed in horror. I felt the car shake violently, then in less than a few seconds, it was as if some very strong force rushed in from the middle of the car. I do not know anything anymore. When I vaguely realized everything, I found myself lying on the road, next to a bunch of injured people who were barely alive. Some unfortunate victims had their bodies covered with mats. In my head was a chaotic mess of sounds, cries, ambulance sirens, and the sound of running footsteps. I remember Thao. I worriedly looked around, but I couldn't see my friend anywhere. I vaguely heard a young man's voice right next to me, "There's another person right in front of the car." I lay motionless, my whole body aching, blood flowing from my neck down my arms. Unconsciously, I heard people screaming to pull the victim's body out. My eyes fluttered open. Under the street lights and countless lights from rescue vehicles, from the side of the crumpled car, people pulled out a body whose upper body had been crushed. The voices of the faint-hearted people screamed, no one recognized the body anymore. At that time, I saw clearly, the waist-length hair, the mouse-colored shirt and the shoes with pink bow ties. They covered the body with a piece of white cloth. I was carried on a stretcher and then put in an ambulance, I guess. Outside, the north wind howled, making whistling, buzzing sounds right in my ears. The wind blew away the ragged yellow leaves, and the coins left behind by passersby swept away in a layer of dust. The incense sticks began to be lit in the dark night. They swayed and trembled in the wind like eyes in the dark. After that death-dealing day, I began to return to normal life. Thao only had minor injuries like me. The day I saw her in the hospital, I felt like a burden had been lifted. I was afraid that something would happen to her. But from then on, strange things started happening to me. I often encountered dreams that never stop. Scarily, they were all dreams related to the car on the day of the accident and the image of the girl with waist-length hair, mouse-colored shirt, pink shoes with bows and her hands scratching each other. That day, every dream was the same, with that girl's confused eyes looking at me, until I felt like I couldn't breathe anymore and suddenly woke up. At first, I thought maybe I was haunted by the terrible accident. Although Thao and I were also the 2 victims with the lightest injuries, what I saw that day, the bodies lying on mats in the middle of that windy winter night, also made me a bit scared. I think after a while I will stabilize myself. Until that evening, after an appointment with a client, I returned home quite late. I only had time to take a quick shower before I climbed into bed and went to sleep. It was cold outside, the wind was blowing loudly on the rooftop, banging loudly on the glass window. While half asleep, crack, jingle, jingle. The sound came from the wind chime as if someone had yanked it down. I opened my eyes wide open for a moment and then ran towards the shutters. Outside, the wind is still howling fiercely, the branches of ancient trees are bending in the wind like arms reaching towards me. Under the golden streetlights, the road below was completely deserted. Suddenly, right in front of my house, a girl with waist-length hair, mouse-colored shirt, pink shoes with bows and two hands are scratching each other. There was a flash of lightning, followed by a roaring sound of thunder. Suddenly, in a split second, lightning swept across my face, right in front of my eyes. The girl's blood-stained face appeared with bewildered eyes, just there behind the window glass, 10 fingertips. Broken, blood scratched on the glass. I do not know anything anymore. Opening my eyes, I found myself lying next to the window. Outside, the wind had stopped, but in my room, the scene of destruction was unprecedented. The rainwater splashed in wetly, papers flew around, and some of the paintings on the desk were askew. Coming to my senses, I remembered what happened last night. Have I seen a ghost? There's no reason. I reassured myself and thought, maybe last night when it rained I got up to install the window and was so tired that I passed out. I've also been feeling a bit weak lately. The rest is probably due to my random dreams. The next afternoon, I was sitting at lunch at the company. Suddenly there was a girl sitting across from me who occasionally glanced at me and then looked around. I was a bit surprised, but I also looked at her and smiled back. While I was washing my hands, the girl ran next to me and whispered in my ear, "You're haunted, there's a girl following you." I smiled suspiciously and left. These days, kids are having a trend of watching movies with rumors about horror stories. She probably saw that I was tired and depressed and applied the stories in the movie to this. After work, my friends and I invited each other to go to the old town to drink coffee and then go to West Lake to enjoy the fresh air. When it was almost late, we were wandering on the street, when suddenly I saw under a tree across the street a girl with long hair, and at that moment, I saw pink shoes and two hands scratching each other. My heart skipped a beat. I drove up in the middle of my friends, suddenly thinking about what the girl said at noon. I didn't look back for another moment. Saying goodbye to my last friend at the intersection leading to my house, I suddenly felt scared. Then I felt ridiculous with myself. I'm a man, I go out at night many times, I don't know what I'm afraid of anymore. Thinking so, I still accelerated and sped away in the dark night. I wanted to go home as soon as possible. Seeing the bright yellow light at the beginning of the alley, I suddenly felt strangely happy. There's nothing wrong, maybe I'm just crazy. But when I turned the corner, under the reflection of the puddle on the road after the afternoon rain, I recognized the silhouettes of two people sitting in the car. One person is of course me, so what about the other person? Who is it? I turned around, there was no one behind me. The street was empty. I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck, then a half-conscious whisper echoed in my ear. It's me. I braked suddenly, and the cat jumped out of nowhere in front of my car, meowing plaintively in the dark night. I drove like crazy out of the alley, rushing towards my friend's house. I pressed the doorbell repeatedly. I was afraid to hurry up, otherwise it would catch up to me. My friend looked surprised when he saw me, but probably saw that my face was pale. He didn't ask much, he just told me to go in and take a shower quickly so it wouldn't be cold. As soon as the bathroom door closed, hot steam began to rise. Warm water from the shower poured into my body, making me feel extremely alert. Reaching for the towel, I somehow had a strange feeling. I looked around. Nobody else. I looked up. In the mirror, the face of a girl with long loose hair. Her face was pale and blood was flowing from the corners of her eyes, with bloody fingers pressed against the glass. I screamed in horror. When I woke up, I was surprised to see that I was still alive. My friend is sitting worriedly next to me. He told me to scream, causing even the neighbors to look over and ask what was going on. After listening to my story, the next day he took me to the suburbs. There I went to an old lady's house. When she first saw me, the old lady scolded me right away, "Don't follow him anymore."